What's up, Star Wars nerds? Welcome to another episode of Blurrg and Fett. On today's episode, I'll be catching up on some recent pickups, including the brand new Blurrg for the Vintage Collection. Plus, we'll ask ourselves, will an IG-12 figure work in TVC? Let's get to it. Welcome back to the channel. This is episode 104 of Blurrg and Fett. And if you've been following me for a while, you probably know that I am primarily a vintage collection collector. However, I do collect Black Series every now and then as well. Basically, if there is a Black Series figure I really like, I'm going to buy it, especially if it's one that we don't have in the vintage collection. And we know there is a ton of Black Series figures not currently available in TVC. As you see to my left here, I've got a number of Black Series figures on display. I've also got a number put away, unfortunately. And I am trying to downsize how many Black Series figures I buy because I'm just simply out of room in my collection. I still have that HasLab Ghost coming, and then eventually the HasLab Cantina. So I am completely out of room. I really need to stop buying Black Series, but I'm having trouble every now and then when a figure comes out in Black Series that I really want. And one of those figures I really wanted was IG-12. So when they announced he was coming, I knew I was going to go out and get him because I was really curious to see how they would go about doing it. So we're going to take a close look at IG-12. I have not opened it yet. I have not looked at it very closely. I haven't watched any videos about it. So I'm really curious to examine it and see, will this really work in a 3 3/4 scale, or would Hasbro have to cut some major corners where it just wouldn't be as fun of a figure. But before we get to IG-12, I do have some pretty cool pickups to share, including the much anticipated Blurrg for the Vintage Collection. Really excited about that. And some other pretty cool stuff as well. So let's take a look at those. Alright, to start off, I picked up this Power of the Jedi version of Queen Amidala from the Phantom Menace. Hasbro has not really done much for the anniversary of the Phantom Menace in the TVC line, and this was one of my most wanted Phantom Menace figures, and so I figured Hasbro's not going to give it to us anytime soon, so I'll just go ahead and pick up this version. It was only like $10, so I figured, that is not bad for the most recent version of the Theed Palace Queen Amidala we have. And she actually looks better than I was expecting. Yes, she's very plasticky looking, but the face sculpt is good and the paint apps look good on her head. And I might have this little speck of something on their shoulder. I don't know what's going on there. And the articulation is pretty bad. Her arms swivel, her head just barely swivels. Her legs do not articulate at all. So I can't even say this is 5 POA, it's actually 3 POA, but from a distance she does look good, so I think she'll do fine on display until Hasbro decides to give us a proper TVC version of Queen Amidala. Next, I picked up this Vader's medical droid from the Revenge of the Sith line. This was pretty much an impulse buy simply because it was a droid I don't have, and it looks pretty interesting, and just never picked this one up for whatever reason, so I decided let's go ahead and get it for like $8, not a bad deal. And here's a look at the packaging, and here's everything out of the packaging, and it came with this neat little floor piece from Mustafar. Very cool piece, but I'm not clear on whether or not it actually is intended to go with this figure, because it does have an action figure peg there, and this figure does not have peg holes. So let me know in the comments if you know if this is supposed to be just a collectible piece to go with like Anakin and Obi-Wan. But I actually think this could also make a great piece to go with IG-11 from the Navarro scene where he gets into the lava. Taking a look at the figure, there's not a whole lot to this one. He's rather small. If it weren't for his legs, he'd be really tiny, I think. Just a lot of fixed pieces there. His head does articulate a little bit, and his arms can do a little bit of movement. He's got some articulation at the elbows and everything, and his legs are just kind of flimsy. They do have a hinge there at where it connects to the body, but there's fake hinges at the knees, so that's not great. And the legs overall are pretty flimsy, so it's a little bit cumbersome getting him to stand. And so, yeah, this just isn't a great figure. It is an interesting design, but I love the lava piece that came with him. That's actually my favorite part about this, I think, because I will use that in some form or fashion. Next up, the X-Wing Pilots 4-pack for the Vintage Collection came in maybe a couple of weeks ago. And the main reason I got this is I wanted this Duros pilot. I just think he is really cool. That's really all I wanted. This alien female has an interesting head sculpt, but my issue with the female pilots is they're using the male body, and I just don't like that. It doesn't look right. You hold up the male pilot next to the female, you can't even really tell unless you really concentrate on the face. And so I think that was just kind of a cop-out. I wish they had given us a more feminine body mold for the female pilots. So that was really disappointing to me. However, I do like the various helmet designs that come with this pack, and I love that Duros pilot. Next up, this just arrived today, and it's the Black Series Imperial Armored Commando from Mando Season 3. I love this trooper design. This was one of my most wanted figures for TVC, and they hadn't pipelined them yet in TVC, so I had to pick up the Black Series version. Here's everything straight out of the packaging. Comes with this blaster pistol. It's got a nice little touch of metallic paint apps on there. His rifle looks really cool, and it also has some tiny little bits of silver metallic paint. And there's his jetpack, a very clean, sleek design. We will see this jetpack coming with a Mando in TVC, so I have to believe TVC will be releasing this trooper at some point. So let's take a closer look at the figure. Great mold, got some nice little paint apps there along the arm. This is such a cool design. It really reminds me of a cross between a Stormtrooper and a Mandalorian, which of course is what I'm sure they were going for with this figure. And all the articulation is, just as you would expect for a modern Black Series figure, so no issues there. He does have the vertical, up and down hinges at the wrist, which is great for troopers that need to hold weapons, especially rifles, so that works good. And at the crunch, let's see, it's on like a ball joint there, and he's got pretty good range of motion for crunch. He's got the barbell hips, of course. No swivel cut at the thigh, and I think I heard that is going to be a thing moving forward Black Series. But he does have good ball hinges at the knees and the rocker ankles. And so yeah, pretty good articulation. You're gonna have no problem getting this guy in various poses. So let's just put him in position with his rifle. He's got the blaster pistol in his holster, and yeah, this guy looks really awesome. I can't wait until we get some of these guys in the Vintage Collection so we can, get a nice little army going. This is an awesome trooper, very cool figure. All right, now we're talking. This is the Blurrg and Mandalorian set from the Vintage Collection. Very excited to get this. This was one of my most wanted beasts for the Vintage Collection. So happy that Hasbro finally gave us this guy. There's a look at the packaging. Here is a look at how he was packaged. Pretty strategic there with the card, and the card did arrive undamaged, short of a tiny bit of scuffing at the edge. This Mando is VC335. It's a very cool card back image. Really like this one. I will be keeping one carded, and we'll have one loose from my second set. Here's everything out of the packaging, and let's first take a closer look at this new Mando figure. Of course, this is his early Season 1 look. It's a new version of that. The paint apps I've noticed look a little bit duller. We'll bring in the original version in a minute just to compare. But the main thing about this one is he does come with the barbell hips, so that's great. All the articulation is what you'd expect, except I didn't know that this thing does not have rocker ankles. That is a bit of a disappointment. It's got a hinge there at the ankle, but not rocker ankles, so I'm not sure what's going on there. And actually, now that I mentioned it, I think Boss Bounty did bring this up, and I just forgot. I do love his rifle here. The paint apps look really good. I'll bring out the original one just to compare, but it seems like this is even better. And then he's got the standard metallic paint for his blaster pistol. So I really like the look of his accessories. But let's go ahead and bring in that original Season 1 Mando. And you can see it's noticeably duller paint on the new version. And I'm not sure if that's more screen accurate or not, so it may be intentional. Of course, the new one has that Beskar pauldron, and the biggest difference beside the articulation is the cloth goods cape, which is way better. And lastly, I just want to compare the rifles from the original version and the new version. They got the original version on the left, and the new one is on the right. And it's very subtle, but the new one does look a little bit better. All right, so let's check out what we really came here for, and that is the Blurrg itself. And this thing looks pretty awesome. The paint apps are done very well. I like the saddle. I really love the eyes. They did a great job on those eyes. His mouth does have a hinge and opens, and it's got some nice detail inside the mouth. Teeth look good. And as far as the articulation, it has all the articulation you could possibly want. So it's got ball hinges there at the shoulder. His knees articulate, and he's got hinges at the ankle. And check this out. He's actually got rocker ankles. I find that pretty ironic that the Mando he comes with doesn't have rocker ankles, but the Beast has rocker ankles. The tail moves as well. So yeah, the articulation is just fine on this thing. And it comes with a harness, of course. There's a look at the harness. And you just stick this in his mouth like so. Well, you got to put the bottom part under his lip. Let me get that under there. So then he just kind of bites down on like that. So that works great. And there you go. So really liking the Blurrg, but let's see how Mando rides on him. And there he is, and he fits on him just fine. And if I spent a little more time on it, I could probably get him fitting in that seat even better. But yeah, this works just fine. Of course, you've got the barbell hips, which was an absolute necessity to make this work. But yeah, he's looking good. Can grip the harness fine. And one thing I almost forgot to mention was how well balanced this Blurrg is. It is very sturdy. Like, I was afraid because he's a two-legged beast that he would be wobbly and unbalanced, but no, it is sturdy, very well balanced, a lot of weight to it. So the next question is, will Kuiil ride properly on the Blurrg? So here he is, and he does. He does fit on there. Thank goodness Hasbro actually made this Kuiil figure very articulated with barbell hips. Again, an absolutely necessary feature for him to work. And I think I could probably get him looking better with his legs if I spent a little more time. You know, I think his knees should go probably a little more forward than I have him here. But the bottom line is it works. You can get Mando and Kuiil riding on the Blurrgs. And this is an awesome, awesome set, a must-have for TVC collectors and fans of the Mandalorian series. And finally, one more bonus pickup before we get to the IG-12. This actually just arrived while I was recording the video, and it is another addition to my vintage Kenner 48 back ESB Bounty Hunters. It is IG-88. This one is on a 48 back B card, which means the Revenge of the Jedi offer sticker is an actual sticker and not printed on. It does have a price tag over a removed price tag, so that's not great. And it's got a dent on the bubble, but this thing presents really nicely, you know, other than those issues. And yeah, his weapon has come detached, which is very common on these 48 backs and really doesn't bother me that much. But other than those things, it is a great looking addition, and I got it for a really good price considering these things can get really expensive. There's a look at the back. The back is in, you know, very good shape. There is the big Free Admiral Akbar sticker. Again, on the 48B, it is a sticker. On the 48C, it is printed. But the 48Cs, I've only seen one since I started looking for this guy, and he went for over $1,000. And so I was happy to pick this thing up for just over $200. So here's a look at all my carded 48 back ESB Bounty Hunters. The two on the left are ungraded, and they are both 48 back Bs. And the three on the right are graded and are all 48 back Cs. These bounty hunters are some of my favorite figures ever since I was a little kid, so really excited to have almost completed all of them in their original Kenner packaging, especially in the 48 back with that free Revenge of the Jedi figure offer, which I love because it obviously says Revenge instead of Return, because these offers came out before Lucas changed the name of the film. Now the real challenge is going to be able to find a 48 back B or C Boba Fett. Those can get pretty pricey. I was very close to acquiring one recently on Heritage Auctions, but it just went too high. It was a 50 grade that presented really, really well. Action Figure Grader was talking about it and calling me out about it. But unfortunately, despite being a 50 grade, I think enough bidders realized how well it presented, and so the price just went way too high for me, so I had to bow out. But I'll be on the lookout for other opportunities in the future. Alright, so here is the brand new IG-12 and Grogu figure for the Black Series. This is one of my most wanted figures from Mando Season 3, along with that Armored Commando and several others. And I had to get my hands on this to see how well they engineered this figure. And here's everything out of the box. Doesn't come with a lot of accessories, but it does come with these Anzellans. Here's a look at the first one, and they do have a little bit of articulation. Their arms can swivel, their head can move, and they can actually rotate at the waist. So that's pretty cool. I did not expect them to be able to swivel at the waist. Nice little feature there. Let's take a look at the Grogu. Pretty standard Grogu. His head can move a little bit and his arms can move, and that's about it. And let's just grab that other Anzellan so you can see the difference between the two. There is quite a bit of difference, different head sculpt. You know, their outfits are basically different. So that's nice that you got two, you know, independently looking Anzellans with this set, and they're both super cute. All right, so let's take a look at that IG-12 figure itself. Now, I was extra excited about this because the IG-11 figure that we got for the Black Series was terrible. It was basically a repaint of IG-88, so not accurate at all, but this one looks really good. You can see a lot of this design was inspired by the TVC version, and it's got the independent swiveling sections on the head. The articulation is identical to the TVC one, which is an excellent figure, by the way. Can bend at the elbows, but he does have separate little hinges for his claws there. That's awesome. It looks really good. Yep, so at the legs, you do have some barbell hips, which are pretty restricted just because of the design, but again, plenty of articulation there that you would need. There are joints at the knees, which are a little tight, maybe a little bit nervous bending them, but you do get 90 degrees there, and yeah, everything looks really good. The ankles do have hinges, and it's the kind that just has like a ball socket that plugs into the legs, and the hinges get enough angle there that you would need for this type of droid, and it actually has a little bit of a side-to-side rocker, so that's pretty awesome. So let's take a look at the most important feature of this, arguably, and that is the cockpit, if you will, where Grogu will go, and it's pretty cool, the little details they did inside. Let's just stick an Anzella in there, see how he fits. Yeah, plenty of room for the tiny little Anzellans to move around in, and so that works nicely. And a feature I almost forgot about is the actual controller joysticks. They do articulate, and that is really important so that it can fit in Grogu's hand. So I've got Grogu in there, he fits great, and you push those joysticks out to the side so his arms can grab onto those joysticks. It was a little tricky getting them into his hands, but I was able to do it, so that is important, and I'm really impressed with how the Grogu can fit in there, hold the controllers, and it doesn't seem awkward. Hasbro did a great job making this figure work both visually and functionally. And so now I wanted to explore whether or not this could work in the 3 3/4 scale. So let's bring in IG-11 from the vintage collection, and let's go ahead and remove Grogu from that cockpit torso area. And you see it's just a lot of room in there. And so, at first I'm very skeptical that this could work in the smaller scale properly. But one thing I've noticed is to accomplish this, they really added on some extra features to the main torso. On the back, it's kind of a hollowed out backpack area, if you will, for the back of that seat. And then the front. And so, you can see with a TVC Grogu, it just needs a little bit more space. And so I'm thinking, maybe they could achieve that with the same concept of having that hollowed backpack area, if you will, where he can kind of rest in there and take up that extra space. And then the front door, it also kind of bows out at the chest. And so, that allows for that room. And so it's not just like squeezing in a Grogu into an existing IG-11 figure that's hollowed out. That wouldn't work. But I think with those extra features on the back and on the front, I'm thinking this could actually work. Now, whether or not they get as much detail and whether or not they articulate the joysticks, they could. It's just a little bit trickier when you're dealing with smaller pieces, but they definitely could do it. It's just a question of, will Hasbro do it? I think it would be super important for Hasbro to articulate those joysticks so we could actually put it in Grogu's hands due to the limited articulation of his arms. He can't, bend his elbows and squeeze those arms in tight enough. So they've got to be able to articulate, or at the very least, Hasbro should mold them so they are angled out far enough so he can grab them. So they might go in that direction as well. In fact, now that I think about it, that's probably the direction they most likely would go in versus the articulated joysticks. All right, so now that I have a much better understanding on how Grogu is able to fit in the cockpit for the Black Series IG-12 with that extra back plate and the door in the front being bowed out, I am very optimistic that Hasbro could make this work in the 3 3/4 scale. Perhaps it would not have quite as much detail in the cockpit area, for example, the articulated joysticks I mentioned, but I think overall they could do a more than adequate job making this figure work without having to mold in a permanent Grogu inside the cockpit. That would not be good. I do not want that. It needs to have the function, and I think they can do it. Of course, this would be a deluxe figure in TVC, but if they execute it properly, it will be well worth it. All right, that's going to do it for this episode of Brett on Fett. Let me know in the comments if you think IG-12 will work in TVC. Also, don't forget, I'm going to be at icccon in Nashville, Tennessee next weekend from Thursday, October 3rd through Sunday, October 6th. So let me know if you're going to be there, and if you're there, please come and say hi if you see me. Thanks for checking out this video. Thank you so much to my subscribers. Don't forget, you can also follow me on Instagram. Take care, and we'll see you next time.